Hey, welcome to the Inspiration Podcast with Stan. Glad to have you here this week. I've got an interesting podcast today. And, for some of you, I know that, faith-based podcasts, if that's not your jam, I get it. But I really beg you to, stick around and listen to this. I was asked to speak at a church in the Midwest this last weekend, and something has really intrigued me, and it's about, the fact that Solomon said life is meaningless 38 times. And so it just, in my mind, I just started kind of spewing all these things about, is life meaningless? Is it meaningful? And, it really kind of started to take on a life of its own, a few weeks ago when they asked me to speak. And so I spoke this last weekend, and it really was kind of a meaningful conversation to me, because the more research I did and the more I started to think about previous podcasts and a lot of my guests and how life is so meaningful. But then I also played devil's advocate because I could see where life can be meaningless. And so it's a very interesting podcast. It's one that, again, regardless of your religious beliefs, I think it's good to sit and ask yourself, what part of life is meaningful and what is meaningless? And I really kind of have a lot of fun with this podcast. So I hope you stick around. I hope you grab a virtual cup of coffee, kick back, and let's take a listen to the Inspiration Podcast with Stan. Hey, I'm Stan Gibson, and this is the Inspiration Podcast. Let's get to it. Hey, welcome everybody to the Inspiration Podcast with Stan. Hey, it's not every time you get to listen to a motivational speaker start off with the title, Life is Meaningless. Life is meaningless. Yeah, I was asked to speak at a local church. I guess a local. It's in the Midwest. It's in my old hometown in Illinois, and so I'd been thinking about it for a couple of weeks, and there was something that I was wrestling with, and not really wrestling with. I was just intrigued about, and that's the fact that in the Old Testament, there's a book called Ecclesiastes, and Solomon, who is the son of the King David, he gets this big promotion. He's only he's a Gen Zer. I mean, he's 18 to 20 years old, and he gets this big promotion. But later in life, he talks about life is meaningless. Life is meaningless. In fact, he doubles down on it. He says it 38 times. But he doesn't say it while he's a Gen Z. He waits until he becomes a baby boomer. He waits till he goes through all phases of life, and he's amassed immense wealth. And then he says, life is meaningless. He gets to the end zone and he just says, what did I do all this for? In fact, he says it 38 times. Again, 38 times. That's not like just saying it a couple times. That's like, not doubling down. That's 38 times that life is meaningless. He starts off in the book of Ecclesiastes. He says, meaningless, meaningless, says the teacher. Utterly meaningless. Everything is meaningless. And then just a couple of verses later, he says, I've seen all things that are done under the sun. Everything that we've done, all of them, they're meaningless. It's like chasing the wind. And then he says, without God, human wisdom is absolutely meaningless. Labor, amassing things, life itself, it's just crazy. Everything is meaningless. And so let me give you a little context, and that's what I did for the people that were there in the congregation. I said, as I mentioned, he was a young guy when he was kind of given the keys to Israel. I mean, he was kind of promoted to CEO of Israel right at between 18 and 20 years old. And he, God kind of looked at him and said, hey, you're young, you're kind of new in the position. What do you want? And he could have said, I want the company car, I want the company jet, I want everything, And yet he comes back and he says, he said, I really want wisdom. I just want wisdom, which was the right answer, absolutely the right answer. So he was blessed with wisdom. I mean, the guy was given everything. I mean, if you look at it in today's dollars, I think he would be worth, I looked it up, something like $2 trillion. He was actually worth more than the 5 richest people in the world today. He had like 1,400 chariots, 12,000 horses. He could literally, in today's world, he could put together an army. He could put together 1,400 fighter pilot, aircrafts on a moment's notice. I mean, he ruled the world. He drank out of 24 karat gold cups. I mean, silver was like gravel to him. It was like a solo cup. I mean, he just didn't drink out of it. And so, he had all this wisdom. He had peace. I mean, he had 700 wives. And I know you're saying, I thought he said he had peace. Well, I don't care if you're a husband or a wife. And I don't think anybody wants 700 spouses. But let me explain that real quick. What that means is he had 700 treaties with other nations. And when you have a treaty with another nation, the king gives you one of his daughters. So he literally had treaties with 700 nations. And he had 300 concubines, which means they're the women that get to do the stuff that the wives don't want to do. And so this guy, I mean, he is young, good looking. He's got everything going for him. He's just the VIP. And, God even says, hey, build me a tabernacle. And, he does it first class. Everything the guy does is with abundance. I mean, he really does have wisdom. And yet he goes through each phase of life. Millennial. He gets to be a baby boomer. The older he gets, and then, he also, if you want to get into the Bible, and I'm not here to convert you or tell you, here's what you need to believe. I just think it's a great story. Just a fantastic story, because I think it's very meaningful that he gets to be a Gen X or a baby boomer, and he says, all this stuff I've done, it's worthless. It's just, it's meaningless. So let me give that some context. So in Hebrew language, there wasn't a word called meaningless. Now, there was a word called Hevel, Hevel, Hevel. And Hevel is vapor. It's mist. And when you think of the word meaningless, I mean, it's like, there's life is nothing. Life is non-existent. But when you think of Hevel and you think of mist or vapor, you can actually see it. It exists. You just can't control it. You can't grab it. You can see it, but it's fleeting. It goes by so quick. And so that was the message I was giving, is he's not really saying that it's meaningless. He's just saying that it moves at such a quick pace. It's vapor. All these things that you try to attain throughout your life, they're fleeting. And so I then told the congregation, I'm going to be a true politician here. I'm going to argue both sides of this. I'm going to tell you why I think it's meaningful, but I'm also going to tell you why I think it's meaningless. I think there's truth on both sides here. So I pointed out to some podcasts that I had done last year, some of my earlier podcasts, and I pointed to 4 of the podcasts. And the first podcast I talked about, it was episode 8, and it was with Carly Patterson. And if you've heard the name Carly Patterson, Carly was gold medal winner for the United States Gymnastics 2004. She just rocked. I mean, she was 17 years old. She won a gold medal in the all-around. She won 2 silver medals. And I don't know if many people know this, but we almost didn't even throw a team in to the Olympics in 2004. I mean, kind of most of the A squad, they were hurt. We were banged up. And Carly, she was in a room with, a lot of the B team, and they said, what do you want to do? Do we want to boycott? Not boycott, but do we want to just sit this one out or not? But it was meaningful. It was absolutely meaningful. And they not only participated, they went in and just, they won multiple golds, and they just, blew it away. But, that wasn't really the reason I talked about Carly, because while Carly talked about this, and, she's just so wonderful. But while she talked about this, it wasn't until we got to the point where we started talking about children. And Carly she had polycystic ovarian syndrome, and she couldn't have children. And so they tried fertility treatments and things of that nature, and she had a miscarriage, and life was just just very hard, very hard. This is where she started to tear up. It wasn't over the Olympics; it was over, rightfully so, her family. And her husband Mark and her kept trying, and they kept trying, and with all kinds of things, and lo and behold, they've got 3 wonderful, beautiful children. But it wasn't until Carly just threw in the towel and said, I'm tired of controlling everything. God, here's the keys. I'm turning everything over to you. You know, the timetable, you tell me what the timetable is. You tell me what's important, what's meaningful. And lo and behold, she had three beautiful, wonderful kids. She and her husband Mark, and that's where I mean, just the emotion on this conversation, the tearing up. I mean, that's meaningful. Life is meaningful. The next episode that I talked about was episode 7, and that was with Amanda Zwanziker. And I'd known Amanda for about 20 years, and when I first met Amanda, I mean, Amanda seemed like she had everything together. She was an international sales lady. She has an engineering degree. She was traveling the world, making a lot of money, and attractive, everything. She just really had, a very vibrant career. But, she didn't have a good marriage. She had a lot of things going on in life, and she later shared with me that she was paralyzed on the inside. On the inside, she was going through the motions. She was just felt, like she was paralyzed. And the reason I keep using the word paralyzed is because years later, and she had turned her life over to Christ. And years later, she met a wonderful man. She had entered an abusive marriage, and she found a wonderful man, and they were engaged. And he was out on an ATV with her daughter on the back, swerved to miss a deer, went through the culvert, broke his neck. And the daughter was fine, but he was paralyzed. He was paralyzed from the neck down. And as he's there in the hospital, he's laying there paralyzed, and really wasn't a true believer at that point in time, but according to Amanda. But they both, kind of did something I really don't, think God wants us to do, and that's make a deal with him. But they said, you know what? Let us walk out of here. Let him walk out of here in 30 days. And we're yours. Now, I don't think he sprinted out of the hospital, but he did walk out. He walked out in 30 days. And, shortly after, Amanda wrote a book and on the Paralyzed movement. She started a women's ministry, the Paralyzed movement. And in the episode that we had the podcast, her real dream is to get into women's prison ministry and make a difference. And so, we can be paralyzed on the inside. We can be paralyzed on the outside. But sometimes God is his timetable, just as it was with Carly. He's got a timetable for all of us as to what's going to happen, and we can't see it. We can't see it. And so, I moved on and I talked about episode 14, which was with Lauren Sisler, just a wonderful, wonderful human being. Lauren is a ESPN sideline reporter for the SEC conference. And she's a bundle of energy and joy to be around. And as I talked to Lauren, when she was 19 years old, she was a freshman at Rutgers. She gets a call from her dad, and he says, Lauren, I've got bad news. Your mom just passed away, and you need to come home. Lauren gets on an airplane, gets home, and her uncle picks her up at the airport. Says, I've got bad news. Your father just passed away. You see, she lost both parents within 6 hours of each other. They had been battling chronic pain for years and been taking prescription drugs, which then was opioids and fentanyl. But the mother had accidentally overdosed on fentanyl, and her dad, with just immense grief, did the same thing. And so now she finds herself without two parents, but it took time. She got some help. I mean, she had a good base of people around her at school to help her get through it. But she never really got through it. In fact, she carried it with her for 10 years. Every time somebody would say, what happened to your parents, she would make up something, but it would never be they died of a drug overdose. She didn't want people to think that her parents were drug addicts or things of that nature, because they weren't. They were just normal parents like you and I have that were, on prescriptive pain medicine. And as we know, a lot of people that did that, it can get away from you, and it's very, very fatal. And, it wasn't until years later, again, where Lauren really turned on her faith and her life over to Jesus and said, it's yours. How do I handle this? And, as God helped her walk through it, she wrote a book called Shatterproof, How My Parents Died of Opioids. And she is just such a breath of fresh air. If you haven't read her book, you really ought to read her book. She's a wonderful human being. And she and her husband have a young son. And, she had a brother who didn't get the same help that she got, the same assistance. And he went into the Navy, and unfortunately, he died of alcoholism just a couple of years ago. And yet, Lauren turns to her faith to get through these times. Life is meaningful. Life is absolutely meaningful, even with this hardship. And in fact, in the book of James, James says it's not if you're going to have problems, it's when. It's when. I mean, pain is inevitable. It's going to happen. How we deal with it is really, kind of the answer. And so, it's just a really touching story. And Lauren, if you want to really do something fun, go on to YouTube and look up Lauren Sisler, Sisler, and look at the sideline shuffle. She has an infectious sideline dance that she has a different one for before every game, and it's really viral. It's so much fun to watch, and she's just such a cool person. So anyway, I think you'll like that a lot. So life is meaningful. Life's meaningful to Carly. Life's meaningful to Amanda. Life is meaningful to Lauren. And the fourth podcast that I talked about was a podcast that actually just dropped a couple of days ago. In fact, I think it dropped today. And it's with my good friend Craig Perra. And Craig was an attorney and very successful. And Craig had a lot of addictions. And he had addictions with pornography, addictions, I think, maybe with drugs. But the thing that really got him fired was he had an integrity problem. And, he stretched the truth, this and that. He got fired over it. He had these addictions. He was now without a job, lost his marriage, his family. And every time they would put him into some type of a treatment center. And he said nothing ever took. I mean, it was like he would just walk out. And it wasn't until somebody talked about, they put it in language he could understand as a businessman. They talked about risk management. And for some reason, that just rang a bell with him. And he started thinking about addictions from a business perspective. What would executives at the highest level, what would resonate with them to help them get through their addictions? And to this day, Craig works with professional athletes. He works with hedge fund managers. He works with elite executives because there's a lot of pain out there right now. And there are a lot of people that are dealing with pornography because the internet is so accessible. They're dealing with addictions. And as he told me, professional athletes, a lot of, women know these professional athletes' schedule better than they know them. I mean, they are ripe for people coming into their lives and testing them. And, it was great. I got a text from Craig last week, and he said, "Hey, I had a great day today." He said, I heard that, from one of my clients, his wife tore up the divorce papers. He said, I had another one that is, family's letting him back in. He's going to be home for Christmas this year. I mean, that's life is meaningful. Life is meaningful when you look at it from that perspective. I mean, if he did nothing else, two families are generationally going to succeed because of what Craig is doing. And so I just look forward to a long friendship with Craig and, doing whatever I can to help him. But I know that he's just a great guy with a great heart, and he had to go through some very tough times. And we talk a lot about faith. We talk a lot about the spiritual aspect of how he introduces that Because, faith and religion aren't for everybody. Wish they were, but, everybody's different. People have different ideas and views, but for him, he became very, very faithful. He has a very real relationship with Christ and spiritual. He believes that spiritualism is a big part of the recovery. So life is meaningful. Life is meaningful, especially with intention. So when we turn our life to intention and we turn to our gifts, we turn to the things that we do best to make life meaningful for others, not for ourselves, but for others. Life is meaningful, and that's a big part of my practice. I teach intentionality in every aspect of your life. Leaders, teams need to be intentional. Well-being, spiritual purpose, their careers, their mindset. You have to be intentional. We walk around 50 to 60% of the day drifting. We're just operating out of the subconscious with no plan. And so we need to make life intentional. But as I said, I was going to argue both sides here. So I was going to argue the other side as we talk a little bit about life is meaningless. Now, I had been at a service years ago, and I saw this illustration, and so I tried to illustrate this to the congregation. And I showed them on the screen the biggest ball of twine in the world. I mean, this thing probably is 40 feet high, 30, 40 feet wide. And I said, in your mind, I want you to visualize, I want you to 10x that. I want you to think that this is the big, it reaches the heavens. It is that big of a piece of twine. And I said, I'm going to start to unravel it. And I went over to the very first seat or perch, the church pew, and I act like I nailed in a piece of that twine. I was going to start to unravel this huge, huge ball. And I walked back and forth as though I was unraveling. And I said, it's not going to make a difference in this ball. It's never going to get any smaller. And I said, we could take this thing all through the church. We could go upstairs. We could wrap it around 25, 30, 40 times. We could take it outside. We could go down one of the streets, go uptown, go to the main street, wrap it around, the main street 3, 4 times, take it out to the interstate. That ball isn't getting any smaller. We've still got this huge ball of twine. And now we can take that same twine and, we can go down the interstate. And, we were in Illinois, and I said we could go to Champaign. We could go down to Effingham. We could go down to Paducah, Kentucky. We could go on to Atlanta. We could go to Florida. We could cross the water, and we could go to South America. We could just keep going and going. And this ball is still endless. And so I wanted to paint this picture that this twine, this ball, is eternity. And then I went and I grabbed a Sharpie, and I walked over just a few feet from where I actually started unraveling this twine. And I put a little dot right there. I said, that's your life. That's vapor. That's Hevel. That's mist. That's uncontrollable. That's how long we're on earth before we enter eternity. If you believe and subscribe to this, which I do, that's eternity. And so from that aspect, life is meaningless because in the scheme of things, the things we get worried about, the anxiety we have, the things that upset us throughout the week, they're absolutely meaningless. The job we didn't get, the this we didn't get, the person that cut us off in traffic, all the things, literally 99% of the things that we do each and every day are meaningless. Now, I've been in a lot of conversations the last few days, and I've got some great guests that are going to be coming up on future podcasts. And I don't like to, always just focus on, people with cancer, people with diseases and things of that nature, but I do have people coming up that, they know they're not going to be here in a year or two. And it's very, very sobering for them to understand and realize life is meaningless. I did a podcast. It was episode number 20 with Jerry Foster. And Jerry, had told me at one point in time he had a 50-50 chance of living for 5 years. And he said, when death becomes certain, life becomes rich. When death becomes certain, life becomes rich. And so that richness, life was very meaningful. He said, I wish I didn't have this diagnosis, but now that I know, life is very meaningful. Life is rich right now. I'm having conversations that I wish I would have had a long time ago with my wife, taking each of my kids on vacation, separate vacations. What do you want from Dad before he leaves this earth? We talked about everything. And he said, again, I wish I didn't have it, but now there's clarity. And so, so I think we can argue this thing both ways. I think we can argue where, life is very meaningful. You look at those 4 stories I told you, Carly and Amanda, Lauren and Craig. Life is meaningful. The time we're here, we need to use our gifts and be intentional. We need to use our gifts and be intentional in helping other people have meaningful lives. And I really believe that when we take the focus off of us and we use our gifts to help other people find meaningful lives, our life takes on meaning. Our life takes on meaning. So that was the crux of the conversation that I had. And, I found myself through the week. In fact, I kind of had a call to action there in the church. And I said, as you go through the week, I want you to pause. I want you to pause when anxiety, something happens and you're frustrated. And I want you to think about that big ball of twine. I want you to think about, is this really meaningful or is it meaningless? Is this just one of those things that just, why do I get upset about it? And in fact, I told them about, just even having a physiological sigh. And what that is that's basically any time that, in fact, I do this 60 to 70 times a day. Every time that, a little anxiety pops up, I just breathe in through the nose very hard. There's science around breathing in through the nose. And, it's a filter and it helps get more air to the lungs. But I breathe in through the nose about 70%, stop, and then I go the extra 30%. So it's a big through the nose and then additional 30%. And then I just let it out nice and slow. And I'll do this until that anxiety goes away. And so that was kind of my call to action. I said, you know what? I just really want you to think, what in life is meaningful and what is meaningless. And I've had several situations. My wife and I we're traveling a lot right now. We got a lot going on. And obviously you're going to just, things are going to come up and you're going to have anxiety. And I've actually had to stop this week. And I've had to say, okay, am I just trying to control right now? Am I just trying to control when Hevel, it's really Hevel, it's mist, it's vapor. It's all disappearing. Everything's going by so quick. So should I really take the effort and energy and have anxiety? One thing about anxiety is it creates inflammation. Inflammation is what creates sickness and disease. And so, the more anxiety you have, the more you are susceptible to being sick or to having disease. And so it's best to always just manage our central nervous system. And that's a big part of what I do with clients when I work with leaders is managing our anxiety, managing our central nervous system. And I'm working on some new things right now that I'm excited about. I'm going to be podcasting on them in the future. There is a company that I'm working with, and I'm really excited because I'm trying their app right now, and it's really just rock solid as it relates to being able to manage my parasympathetic and my sympathetic nervous system, which are 2 chambers of your body that measure. One is stress and the other one is recovery. And so there's a lot of cool things going on right now. But again, life is meaningful. Life is meaningful. But if you take a step back and you look at eternity, in some ways it could be meaningless. So it's something to think about this week, everybody. Take a little thought about that. Think about what's meaningful, what's meaningless. And I've got some good podcasts coming up. I've got some that we're gonna double down on this topic a little bit. because again, you know that I love to talk about intentionality. I love to talk about transformational growth. So anyway, hey, I'll tell you what, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening. And again, for some of you, religion or faith isn't your jam, but if you listen to this just from the standpoint of thinking about life, I really appreciate it. And, I'm never here to tell people what to believe, but I do want to challenge, and I also don't want to walk away from what I believe. And so I appreciate you just listening in. So thank you very much. I appreciate it. I've got a great episode coming up next. You're not going to want to miss it. And you know what? May you all live a rich and intentional life. Take care. Hey, everybody. Hey, I hope you enjoyed today's discussion about meaningful and meaningless. I hope it intrigued you a little bit. Again, my whole practice is around intentionality, and intentionality around your career, intentionality around the relationships in your life, your well-being, your health, your energy, around, your mindset. And so, I really believe even the spirituality, or if that isn't your jam, it's purpose. But how intentional are you in those key areas of your life? And so I think that this one today really kind of hit on that, because I think there is a lot of intentionality, a lot of intentionality around our own purpose, around our own spirituality, and how that affects and impacts our life. And as I had went through a lot of the different stories, from Carly and from Lauren Sisler, from Amanda, from Craig, again, boy, you don't have to just go to those four. You go to almost anybody you walk up to in the street, and everybody's got a story. Everybody's got a story. And when you get into those stories, you just realize life is meaningful. Life is meaningful, but we have to make it meaningful. We have to make it impactful. And you only do that with intention. And that's why, I walk so many of my own clients through extreme self-awareness. We go through journaling exercises that really make you think about, the impact you have on others in life, and just intentionality and how you want to show up. So hopefully today sparked some interest. It made you think a little bit. And I've got some great episodes that are coming up. I've got one coming up, Food, Wine, and God, that I think you're going to love a lot, about, an entrepreneur who's putting together documentaries about, the food and the wine throughout the Holy Land. And it's really cool. It's very interesting, to say the least. And so I've got that one coming up. I've got some more solo casts where we're going to talk about, just intentionality around leadership. And, it's facing a lot of leaders today. So hang with me, stick with me, catch an episode or two. If you need to go on 1.2 or 1.5 just to kind of get through, that's fine. I talk fast anyway, so I don't know how that's going to land on you. But anyway, my main goal is to help you. My why is helping you find your why. And I hope this episode did it. May you all live a rich and intentional life. Take care. Well, that's it for today, my friends. I hope this conversation sparked something meaningful for you. If it did, share it with someone who could use a little inspiration too. You can find more tools, stories, and coaching to support your journey at StanGibsonSpeaks.com.